Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Sid Meier's Civilization V, The Great Game. As is usual, I am your host, Karelia. Very lovely to see all of you once again. In the last episode, we put the battle in Battle Royale as we got to see some of the wars around the world. Before we continue, I want to thank all of you for the massive support the first two episodes have gained on YouTube. Your support has been greatly appreciated, and if you want to continue supporting the series, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Let's get started, shall we? The nation of Nigeria under President Olusegun Obasanjo is doing pretty well for itself, as is the expanding colony of Argentina. With 4 cities, President Juan Manuel de Rosas is doing pretty well. Coiot is also doing really well for itself. 5 cities with 2 more on the way. Next we get a look at the Republic of Mongolia under President Sakyagin Elbegdorj. This, again, is another civilization with 4 cities. Here we get a look at my beloved, my homeboys, the Khanty under Prince Alak of Koda. We turn now to Karelia to see they are settling a 4th city in order to possibly replace their failing Aunus. While the city defenses still last, it does not seem like the city will remain long in Karelian hands. While the Soviet invasion of Karelia is not the only war in Europe at this moment in time, it is in fact the most significant one, as Aunus is already in red health. Stalin positions his warriors to take the city within the next turn. I do not think there's any way Uki Vainamoinen can defend it at this time. The terribly placed forward settle of Kermanshah by Asterid forces does not seem to impress Achaemenid forces under Cyrus. While this bold, I guess, play by Nader Shah does give them another city, it does not look like it will last that long on the front lines. Hey everyone, remember this war? This is our very first war, Egypt versus the Umayyads. Yeah, things haven't really progressed too much on this front. But the Umayyads have turned things around, considering Egypt was one of the offensive powers of the war, alongside Yemen. Speaking of old wars having gone relevant, we turn to the Portuguese and Aquitaine front. We can see that Aquitaine fields a massive army. We turn now to see that the Karelian front lines have not changed in Karelia's favor. Uki Vainamoinen does not have the forces to defend Aunus, and thus, in this turn, we see the city finally capitulates and falls. Way to get your ass handed to you, huh? Well, let's be fair, Karelia is not out of the game yet, but their expansion options are limited. In the historically bad settlement of Kermanshah, we see that Achaemenid forces are sieging the Asterid city. Things could be turning for the worst for Nader Shah, as not only has he lost one of his own cities, but he's given another to his enemy. An enemy, I feel I might add, that is right next door. If there is no way to contain Cyrus's expansion, Cyrus could become a huge player. In Egypt, we see that Umayyad forces are battling with the native Egyptian forces, as the siege of Elephantine actually begins in proper. Though the city does not look like it will yet fall, it is bad for the Egyptians to have their Mount Sinai city under siege. We also get a good look at a new war as Mali under Sundiata Keita invades Alawite Morocco under Ismail ibn Sharif. It looks as though Malian forces are already besieging the city of Salé. We turn to the Aquitaine and Portuguese War to see that Eleanor's forces are pushing further and further south, but they can't quite seem to get over the mountains. If she had help from her allies down south in Carthage, maybe she could. But Hannibal is occupied with other matters. Do you think Aquitaine could take the city of Braga, by the way? Please let me know in the comments below. As we get a look at the Soviet front lines of the Karelian invasion, we look at the city of Olonets that has since been captured by the Soviet Union under Stalin. Karelia has taken a lot of damage during this war. However, the city of Utwa still looks fairly well defended. I do not think the Soviets will be able to push much further. That said, we see that Karelia does not have too many expansion options. This could be the beginning of the end for them. For many centuries, the Egyptians and the Umayyads have been at war. Hatshepsut in her capital of Thebes is looking at the city of Elephantine, a new settlement near Mount Sinai, and she worries that it might soon fall to Umayyad forces. It might be good to push for peace before that happens. Meanwhile, in Western Africa, we see that Malian forces under Sundiata Keita are damaging, destroying, besieging the city walls of Saleh. Although they will be able to barrage the city walls down to red health, I do not think they are going to be able to capture the city of Saleh, and indeed we find that they do not. Chin up, Sundiata, there's always next turn. By the way, if you are interested in any of the civilizations, I have added end cards to the video that explain the uniques, abilities, and history of each civilization. Watch to the end if you want to see those. Until then, we can see that Aquitaine's war in Portugal is not progressing very far. Not yet. We turn now to Persia to see that Kermanshah, an Afsharid city settled right under the Achaemenid city of Susa, is being barraged down to red health. It does not look as though Cyrus will take the city this turn, but it is ready for them to take the city in the next. Nader Shah must be contemplating the consequences of this Persian civil war. I sort of imagine it as a civil war, of course, because both the Achaemenids and the Afsharids were Persian dynasties. While there is significant discussion to be had about that, for now let's focus on the capture of Kermanshah. As we navigate this unique history of the world, we will continue on to see that the Umayyad siege of Elephantine continues, albeit it is slowing down significantly from what we've had first seen. Eagle-eyed viewers may also note that the Umayyads are taking a huge diplomatic penalty because of this war. Back in Europe, before we move on to the Aquitaine wars that we are seeing, Karelia and the Soviet Union have made peace. That means Aunus remains in Soviet hands. It is a tragic day for viewers with the humor of a 12-year-old. We move back to Aquitaine to see that they have embarked their units to attack Portugal. Wondrous Miss Casia, you may ask. Will Saleh fall this turn? And for that, my dear viewers, I have a wonderful gift for you because we are going to see that Saleh, taking way too much damage for a single city, will indeed fall. And there it goes. My dear viewers, we are seeing things really heating up down here in West Africa because Mali still has a force to continue their invasion of Morocco. This just in Arabia we see that the Umayyads have declared war on the Afsharids, Bangladesh joining in as well. The Umayyads have not committed any troops, with their main focus being the siege in Elephantine, but this is a bad sign for the Afsharids, who are getting involved in more and more conflicts. In fact, as I say that, the Khanti declare war on Nader Shah's Afsharids. With the discovery of embarkation and the progression of sailing techniques, the Aquitaine and Portuguese war is actually ramping up, as Aquitaine is able to get around the mountains by way of sea. European wars are starting to ramp up as we see Prussia getting involved with their previous conflict in Aquitaine, and looking at that, Ukraine is preparing an advanced force for a potential invasion of either Yugoslavia or Prussia. Ukraine, of course, is under the leadership of their actually current president, Volodymyr Zelensky. They currently have 3 cities, but 2 settlers on the way. Over in Arabia, we see that the Umayyads are sort of fending off 2 separate forces, one in Egypt with their siege of Elephantine, and the other in Yemen as they're trying to potentially push for Taiz. Honestly, splitting your forces has never been a good idea in Civilization 5. The Lion King, Sunjata Keita, is in fact pushing to potentially take Rabat, as his very centralized and very impressive army is pushing deeper and deeper into the Moroccan core. It looks as though Ismail ibn Sharaf does not have a defense force to protect his homelands. Everyone, send your thoughts and prayers to Aquitaine. They finally get embarkation, and their forces invading Portugal have just splintered off and been eradicated. Portugal maintains its defenses, and Aquitaine is no better off for their invasion. We continue our look at Prussia and the potential Ukrainian invasion of either Yugoslavia or Prussia. I think that Ukrainian force is very impressive, and Skopje in Yugoslavia does not look as though it is very well defended. Sarajevo is not defended at all. Skirmishes abound outside of Rabat, as we see that the Malian force does not let up on their offensive pressure towards Morocco. Ismail ibn Sharaf has to put together a strong defense if he wants to hold off the Lion King of Mali. I will say, from my own perspective on this, I think Mali and Sunjata Keita, in respect, have put together a very impressive invasion of Morocco. I think it's one of the most impressive wars we have seen thus far. The Egyptian and Umayyad war continues as we see that the Umayyads continue their siege of Elephantine, barraging the city down to yellow health. However, it is still just not enough to break down the walls guarding the city. Poor Nader Shah does not seem to have the cuts for leadership. The Abshirid faction is dwindling in power. Every day seems to be a bad day for Nader Shah. Aside from that, Egypt continues to defend Elephantine valiantly. Despite Aquitaine's best efforts, the flames of war seem to die down in Portugal. They now flicker as if about to die. For those keeping a close eye on the notifications, you can see civilizations such as Prussia under Frederick II have entered the classical era now. This means they are ahead in the tech tree. We also see Yugoslavia preparing to defend Skopje. Mali. I love Mali. Sunjata Keita has proven himself an adept leader, and I am looking forward to seeing how this war with Morocco progresses as Rabat starts to take damage and Malian forces surround it. And yes, Egypt and the Umayyads finally make peace, putting an end to the first war we have ever seen in this world after hundreds and hundreds of years. Clearly, this is a new generation of warfare we are entering as we see more and more civilizations are entering the classical era, and the old wars are dying off, putting in place a new generation of conquerors, of generals, and of soldiers. Leading the way for this revolution is none other than Sunjata Keita, who continues to launch their invasion of Morocco and march onto Rabat. This is a very different type of war than what we've seen previously. A lot of the wars we have seen up to this point were very slow to just take 1 or 2 cities. The exception was the Persian War, where Command Shah got settled and immediately captured. However, Mali has launched a rapid-acting siege of 2 separate cities, and to reap the rewards of this innovative warfare style, they will in fact take the city of Rabat. This is a clear sign of things to come in this new generation of war. And you might have noticed some war declarations off in the background as well. Let's get to that. We cannot discuss the Australian-Banuban War without discussing the history there. Australia is a colonial state. The Banubas are an Aboriginal group, and they are led by a resistance leader to colonialism, Jandamara. Once again, Jandamara resists Australian colonialism. Speaking of resistance, we see that in the Persian Civil War, Achaemenid forces are resisting the Achaemenids, trying to push into their core and expand their influence in the Persian sphere. We also get a look at the Moravi, who have founded the cult of Niao. Having followed the tenets of their religious practice, they seek to expand their influence by allying with the Buganda to the north and invading Lesotho to the south. Last turn we got a glimpse that Yugoslavia and Prussia were now at war. Things finally start to kick off formally as Yugoslavia's army marches on to Magdeburg. Rome has also declared war on Prussia, seeking to hinder the expansion of Germanic presence in Europe. Although it isn't a speech attributed to Marcus Aurelius does declare that Berlin must be delended. In other words, Berlin must be destroyed. We see the Banuba settlement of Dimaluru is under attack by Australian forces. It is adjacent to the recent Motu settlement of Elevala on the northern coast of eastern Australia. Beyond that, the city of Yarangi is also in danger of being taken. However, Jandamara does have a fairly impressive force to resist Australia's invasion. So when recording this series, I didn't realize how much of a hotbed the Middle East was of all these different wars going on. But looking back on it now, I realize, holy shit, a lot is going on, as the Mughals also join in the war on the Achaemenids. While the Achaemenids are pushing for the Achaemenid capital of Mashhad, the Mughals are just trying to push for Damgan. This means, once again, Nader Shah is dealing with two separate fronts of war, which did not turn out well for him the first time. For those of you who are watching at home, let me know in the comments below, what are your thoughts on the Achaemenid and the Achaemenids, really? Just, what are your thoughts on the Persian Civil War as a whole? It has been one of our earliest wars, and one of the most active and consequential, really. With that out of the way, let's move on. Portugal is sending out a settler to the north, potentially to settle Ireland, but we don't know the consequence of that because we're quickly shifting over to see Prussia and Yugoslavia fighting in full force. Prussia is also still at war with Aquitaine and Rome. This is beginning to look like a big war in the middle of Europe. Who would have thought that the Germans are once again the subject of a bit of a European scuffle? As the war progresses and turns move on, we will see that things are generally even. Prussia has a fairly distributed defense, but Magdeburg is still taking some damage as Yugoslavia's offense is just that powerful. I'll be honest, I don't necessarily look at the Australian army and think this is a good composition for them. I think they are vastly underprepared, but they might still take Yarangi. In comparison, I actually really do like the composition of the Banuba Defense Force. They have the vanguard, of course, made of warriors and spearmen, and a backline composed of archers. I don't see Australia progressing too far in this war, but I could see that they might take Urangi, which could be a damaging blow for future wars for the Banuba. As an aside, I happen to know that one of my friends is a fan of the Banuba. Here's looking at you. Luckily, the Banuba and Australian turns are actually really close together, so we are going to be able to see both fronts of this war acting within a single scene. And I think that's actually really convenient for me, because I don't have to cut it and edit it, like the others. Also, it's really weird the Banuba haven't settled Uluru yet, considering they are a religious civ. Meanwhile, in southern Africa, we see the Lesotho are defending Teateyaneng, and also their capital of Thababoju from their foreign adversaries. Lesotho is led by their king, Moshoeshoe I. The Malian-Moroccan War is the gift that keeps on giving, isn't it? Speaking of gifts that keep on giving, we turn now to the Middle East to see that the Mughal invasion of the Asherids is starting to bear fruit, as with their chariot archers, actually, they are beginning to besiege Damgan. Asherid forces are also skirmishing with the Achaemenid forces outside of Mashhad, as well as a lone Golden Horde scout. Not really sending your best and brightest, are you, Batu? Regardless, Cyrus continues to impress, and if you saw earlier, they had one of their unique units, the Sparabara, up at the front lines. It seems it has now died, though. Press F to pay respects. That said, the war is not over yet, because we can see that Achaemenids are still trying to press further and further into Asherid territory. Holy hell, Cyrus. What an aggressive move. Let's turn our attention towards Europe for a bit. We can see that the wars in Europe are starting to ramp up. Rome is sending forces towards Frankfurt, Berlin, and potentially even Königsberg. However, the rough terrain is going to be a huge hindrance for them. The forests are very defensive for Prussia, and of course Yugoslavia is besieging Magdeburg. But all the Prussian front lines are towards the west. Yeah, they're actually not defending their eastern flank. I guess you could consider this flanking as well. It's not a very good job of flanking, because Australia does not really have anything on their southern flank. Prime Minister John Curtin, leading Australia of course, has sent a lot of his forces towards Bandungan, and he has frankly just left Brisbane all wide open. Should the Banuba wish it, they could easily launch a potentially successful counteroffensive. That said, they would need to regroup their forces and make sure they keep their cities well defended in order to launch such an offensive play, such as taking Brisbane. My personal perspective on the matter is that the two powers seem to be pretty evenly matched, although Australia is far less competent at this moment in time. We are going to turn once again to Europe to see the Yugoslavian offensive before again turning to see the Bugandan offensive of Teateyaneng. Although the Moravi have also joined in on the war, Lesotho does not seem to be at much of a threat from them because they don't really have a solidified core army. But Lesotho, of course, is defending itself well. Buganda, however, has a very well-developed army, and they could pose a huge threat to Lesotho. We move now to the final scene of the episode to see that Achaemenid forces pushing towards Asherid capital of Mashhad are continuing to progress, and the Mughals are blitzing through Asherid defenses at Damgan. The Mughals are going to be able to besiege the city down to half health, putting Damgan at a huge risk of capture within the next episode. However, we don't have that much time left. With all that out of the way, I want to express my gratitude to those who have shown tremendous support for the series thus far. You can show your support by leaving a like, comment, and subscribing to my channel. And thank you to everyone for watching. This has been Kazuya, signing off.